Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the Spirits Business Hub. We're so happy to be back here at Provine and hope you're having a great first day at the show. My name is Melita Kiley, I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Spirits Business and I'm joined by three great people next to me, and we are going to be talking all things celebrity spirits and brand growth and strategy, and you should be getting some very good business insights from our speakers today. We have Duncan Frew, who is co-founder of Wolfie's Whisky. We have Vishal Patel, who is CEO of James Gin, and at the end we have Vincent Hanna, who is CEO and co-founder of Brothers Bond Bourbon. My first question to our speakers, Duncan, I think you might want to start us off on this one, but okay. Do you think the perception of celebrity spirits is changing?
I think, well, to be frank, there's probably two categories. There's probably, and I think it's the same as any industry, you've got licensing deals where just a celeb's got their name attached to it, or you've got brands that have got actual co-founders that tend to be famous. So I mean, when I was looking at the questions, the analogy came, is a Wrexham football club, for example, it's not a celebrity football team. It's a fantastic football team, but it just so happens that Ryan Reynolds is an owner. So why can't Wolfie's Whisky, for example, or other brands, I mean, our plan is to be the most rock and roll Scottish whisky in the market, and it just so happens we've got a rock star involved in it. So,
Vishal, do you think the perception is changing?
In terms of changing, I think the perception is probably more negative. I think when I'm speaking to buyers, speaking to distributors, they say, "Oh, you're another celebrity gin brand." I've got to a penny of those, and so I think it's incumbent upon the three of us and other founders and CEOs of celebrity brands to try and convince people that actually there isn't a negative stigma, there isn't a fatigue of too many celebrity brands, and we're trying our best to try and show people that similar to what was just said, that we're more than just a celebrity brand, we're a brand on our own.
Vincent, what's your take?
I agree with both of them. Absolutely. There's a negative stigma with celebrity brands. The fatigue is there. I think now what consumers and the industry are looking for are really credible brands. And you can have a celebrity attached to it or founding one, but they're really looking for depth in the brand. So there's always going to be room for it, but you have to prove yourself right out the gate. It's not just the name, right? So it's ever changing, just like the industry, and the challenges are just as much for a celebrity as they are for any normal brand.
And you talked about credibility. So for the three of you, how do you build that credibility among the trade, whether it's on trade, off trade, distribution? How are you working to build that brand credibility if it's tougher?
I think, if you go into a bar, for example, a credible bar, and say, "Hi, I've got Rod Stewart's whiskey," they'll tell you to piss off. It was as simple as that. And probably most bartenders that we're working with probably don't even know who Rod Stewart is, to be honest with you. So fundamentally, your brand in itself needs to stand up. It needs to have a positioning. The liquid obviously needs to be very, very good. Does a celebrity being part of a company help? Absolutely. What it's helped us in is fundamentally opening doors and making noise, gaining awareness. But it doesn't then create rate of sale. It doesn't then create reorders and repeat orders. So that's where the brand needs to come in. So yeah, that's for me. Vincent, what?
I think if you're relying solely on fame to sell, you've got a short runway, and it really the story has to be there. It has to be authentic. It has to be quality driven. It's product first. And I think what we're learning, and a lot of celebrities who did throw their hat in the game, the ones that are coming in today are far more involved because they know that the headwinds are huge. The days are gone where we slap your name on a bottle and you could sell it and retire. That doesn't exist anymore. And, I always tell people who want to get in, if you're ready for the long road, you're not going to make money for a while. You're going to sweat a lot. You're going to be on the road constantly. And it's a community that you have to become a part of. You can't just expect to be welcomed in. You have to prove. So, one of the things we did as a brand was find the people who didn't want to believe and start selling to them first, because they're the gatekeepers. And if you can get in with them and they understand that there's more than just the name, you've got great support. But it takes time. This is not a 1 year, 2 year thing. It's a long road to success.
Is it literally getting in front of the people?
Absolutely. It's spending time with the industry, with bartenders, with distributors, getting to know the industry. And what I've done with ours personally with Ian and Paul is spending time with your merchandisers, with your distributor, with the bar manager, the store manager. Talk to them. Once they realize that the brand owner and creator, yes, they happen to be a celebrity, but they're involved, you then really get support. And I think what's happened now is you see that the celebrity brands that are still around are the ones that always had a foundation that was based on authenticity.
And Vishal, for you and for James Gin, how are you cutting through the noise and finding that credibility? You know, you said celebrity gins kind of 2 a penny. How are you kind of making your mark and getting people to sit up and take notice?
So I think similar to what Vincent said, James's commitment to the brand is there for retail buyers in particular to see. He spent 28 days in the market last year. We did 15 signings, hand signed 6,000 bottles, shot 500 hours of content for our social media channels. Like, that's like real commitment. He happens to be famous, but any founder would be doing that. And I think when you go in as a celebrity brand, and then the buyer can see that the celebrity's turned up to the meeting, the celebrity turns up to the store, the celebrity like promotes the product on his channels, you know, that shows real commitment to the brand, and that certainly helps us and our growth. I think other things from a trade perspective, particularly in the on-trade, we have a great sort of liquid product and story, and that's got to stack up again, just like any drinks brand. You know, the product's got to be really good. We make our sort of point of differentiation from we're a savoury gin. We use unique ingredients, and I don't know anyone else that's got a parsnip gin. For those of you who don't know what a parsnip is, I tell people from America it's a cross between a carrot and a turnip. We use mustard seed. I don't know if there's many mustard gins around. So we have a sort of credible sort of drinks proposition which stands up. Bartenders really love it. It's different from sort of flavored gins and any other gin out there, and I think that's really important. And then to distributors, you mentioned as well, the way we stand out is our social media reach and engagement. Again, a distributor, you know, in Germany in particular, gin's not doing so well. We like to see ourselves as a communications agency that happens to sell a rather tasty gin. You know, we're the most followed gin brand in the world. Not quite the most followed spirits brand. That goes to Vincent, but we're close. You know, we've got 1.6 million followers. We get 12 million organic views on our socials. You know, that's worth about 110,000 euros in earned media. Like, that's our reach and that's our engagement. And, you know, it just happens to be that we have a gin, and it just happens to be there's a celebrity behind it. But if you buy into that, you know, we can help you grow the brand.
Super impressive numbers there on the reach of the brand. Vincent, Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley. So I'm sure you know them from The Vampire Diaries. They are co-founders with Vincent behind the Whisky. How involved were they in the making of Brothers Bond and the liquid, and how important has that been to the success of the brand so far?
Well, so the brand actually started, it was their creation, their idea. You know, they became friends on a show where they drank bourbon for 8 years straight. So the story started in 2009 for them, and it was just kind of the next step in their journey was to create their own. So they've been involved since day one. I came in after, obviously friends with them. I had some alcohol experience, but they created the vision and what they wanted, but it was all founded on their personal relationship with bourbon. And they wanted to be part of this community. And one thing that I don't want to speak for all celebrities, but most celebrities, they have their IP, and that IP is very much, you know, they protect that. When they are a founder, they realize that their IP can be translated to, you know, building something beyond their IP. But when you're a founder, you get to own it. And very often actors don't own their character. So to be able to create something and be a part of it forever is incredibly special. So for both the guys, this has been the single most amazing journey for them because it's what they started, created, and they're building it up. On top of that, Ian is our blender. So all of the whiskeys, he's blended and put together. Paul is a very creative and strategic thinker. So, you know, they're opposites if you know them. So they're polar opposites, but that's what kind of makes a great team. The involvement, I mean, Ian's here, you know, he'll be here tomorrow. So like you said, it's on the road. I mean, we did last year, I think we were in 27 states. We did the signings. We started off with the signings, which is great. It brings attention, but you've got to go beyond that. And it's talking about the liquid, the story. And now, we're 6 years in. Seeing the celebrities involved, what's happened now is distributors don't see them as celebrities anymore. They're talking to them openly about the market, about the liquid, about what's happening in the industry. And where I think there's a space for celebrities is to help the entire alcohol industry and say, hey guys, we're not dying. There's a shift for sure, but use their voice. So I think what's important, and I speak to both Vishal and Duncan, that celebrity angle can be really capitalized even more now, where it can help the overall industry. So I think, yes, the guys are very involved. They will continue to be involved because now this is their passion. It's what they drive.
Do you find that trade professionals are still quite surprised when they learn about how involved they are?
Absolutely. And I think that's where Vishal was saying too. The more you're in market, especially as a founder, the more you believe in what they're doing because they believe. When they feel like they're being marketed to and there's no relationship behind the brand, there's no authenticity. I hate using that word, but the very foundation of it, if they see that the creator is the person selling it to them, it's very special. It's like the winemaker. You're talking to the winemaker, what yeast they use, how long when they can talk that way and they hear it coming from what they know as a celebrity, it's really special. So with Ian, and you've met Ian a few times, you see it, that passion translates into sales and believing. So, the bartenders are the hardest ones to convince. They try the liquid, they love the liquid, but then they hear from the founder, they kind of, the celebrity disappears. It's the guy who's making the whiskey and he's trying to sell a bottle, and that's special.
And I think you're so right. When it's such a powerful tool when the celebrity is very much involved, and to have them, help to grow the brand and the awareness and really communicate the story because they were there from the foundation of building the brand. But I also think there is a space for celebrities that come in from a marketing perspective and kind of own that is their role in it. And I think perhaps, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but perhaps that's where the kind of skepticism comes in when it's clearly a marketing partnership, but it's portrayed as they're choosing the liquid, et cetera, et cetera. How do you kind of navigate communicating the authenticity of your brands against that extra noise?
It's being visible and being involved, right? So if it's just a marketing thing and it's like, hey, I picked this vodka and I put my name on it, people see through that. The consumer today can research more quickly than ever. So they'll find out like, what distillery are you bottling at? How are you doing this? And they'll ask pointed questions. And we've seen it more and more when you're doing industry events and you're talking and you have consumers or press and they will ask very direct pointed questions and they will get right through to it. So if you have a celebrity, and there's room for this, there are room for endorsements, there's licensing deals, there will always be room for that. But in the alcohol space, and I speak specifically for whiskey, and maybe Duncan can agree, maybe, whiskey consumers are very picky. They like their whiskeys. So coming in as a celebrity and saying, hey, this is the new coolest brand because I'm famous, you're dead in the water. And the more you spend time and with the industry, with the bartenders, especially those that don't want to believe, once you flip them, they are your best ambassadors. But it is absolutely, if it's just a marketing thing, then sell it as that. It's like today it's vodka, tomorrow it's beer, then it's, there will be room for that. I think that's what we're seeing now is the celebrity attached brands are much more authentic because they know they don't want to ruin their IP either. So if they're just being told, hey, come in, we've got this great brand and we want you to be the face of it, that's not what they're looking for, right?
Duncan, how are you and Wolfie's kind of navigating the whiskey space? Because you have kind of positioned yourselves as to be quite a disruptive brand in the Scotch space.
Quite kind, I think.
How are you kind of creating that point of difference beyond just being a celebrity spirit?
Well, fundamentally, our game plan always was we wanted to be like the Nike of the whiskey world. Rod's our Michael Jordan, but he's not the brand. Off the back of that, we're now working with about 36 bands throughout Europe. So even in the last month, we were on the Deftones tour. We're going on tour with Youngblood next month. So what we found ourselves doing is probably replicating slightly what I mean, if we would love to not to copy them as a brand, but what Jack Daniels probably did for whiskey over the years, what Liquid Death's done for water, and our game plan, we always say to people, if the whiskey world went for Sunday lunch, they'd have tweed and tartan, and we'd turn up probably 45 minutes late with a hangover and a leather jacket on. But why can't we be the rock and roll cousin of the whiskey pack? It's all about community. So fundamentally, how can we work with the best lighthouse music-led venues in London, which we now are, off the back of that, opportunities and synergies and symbiotic partnerships just spiral out of control. As I said, we never thought we'd be working with like potentially Youngbloods on his tour. Like in the last 2 weeks, all his bands posting on social media. That's fantastic, because then suddenly, if it is just all on a person like Rod Stewart, who's massively involved in the brand, otherwise, I think, going back to the point, celebrities just put their name in something, they die pretty quickly. Our whole focus, though, was absolutely, is Rod Stewart there to help schmooze and booze and bring, like last night, we had 4 people in America go to his concert and go backstage. So he can do all that, but his contact book's been fabulous opening up, and it gives us credibility if we want to really be a rock and roll whiskey brand, because he is a rock and roll.
And Vishal, the gin category is super saturated. It's been growing immensely over the last decade or so. How are you finding new spaces of opportunity and growth in what is a pretty crowded market?
We try and to take the gin completely out of it. As I said, we market ourselves as a communications agency that happens to sell a really tasty gin. We talk about our fans and our audience rather than our customer base. So, we don't care that the gin industry is not doing very well. In the UK, in Germany, it's down. In the US, I think gin is like the 9th most popular spirit. So, we're kind of like battling upwind against all of these assets. And, from our perspective, we just take that out. If you come to James Gin, you're a fan of our amazing content. We're entertainment first. And then if you happen to like it and you watch 3 or 4 of our videos, and then you may one day try the gin, well, the gin's bloody good. So once you've had one, you'll have another one. So we've made sure that when people get to the product's great. But yeah, we really just try and sort of shut out all of that noise. And I think it was really the founders' ignorance of the spirits industry basically has helped the brand to grow, because they've just done things that no sane person in the industry would do, because it would be against the norm and, against what other brands do. And I think that's actually probably been our secret sauce. The founders are very good at communicating ideas through the mode of television. Not so much building a brand in spirits, but we've managed to take that creativity, harness it, and hopefully start creating a brand that can scale and can also overcome the operational difficulties of, for example, building a brand in the US and the sort of 3-tier system, etc. Building it in Europe. There's a lot of things now that I'm not sure where the other two are in their journey, but we have to grow up a bit and professionalize. And it's great to tell everyone that we don't care about that sort of stuff, but fundamentally it's a business. We're trying to make a profit, and we need to sort of come up with a sort of clear plan to do that.
It's really interesting to hear your take on it, because it is very different to a lot of kind of traditional brand foundations and growth strategies. And I find it particularly interesting because we did a piece in the February issue, I think, of the Spirits Business, kind of talking about how brands can appeal to new audiences and younger drinkers, particularly Gen Z. And so much of what we found out from people we spoke to was that it's not about kind of the more traditional like heritage, provenance, what it's made from, etc., but actually about the connection and the branding and kind of feeling like you're part of that brand before you actually kind of take a deeper dive into what it is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And for us, our brand is everything. Our tone, our look and feel. James's irreverence and his humor. That's super important. We've actually got a funny bit on our website where we have a banned word section. So you're not allowed to say artisanal, curated, quaffable. Other celebrity brands talk about being 70 times distilled. Like to Vincent's point, the consumer now can quickly go on Google and can see right through that. We just try and tell really authentic stories that connect with our audience and our consumer. We found that that's really, really struck a chord. And we've been able to attract a much sort of younger sort of demographic and wider demographic than a sort of traditional juniper forward sort of gin brand that your dad might, drink. No, we sort of 25 to 34-year-olds. They're sort of 33% of our social media audience. And again, when we're going into the bit I was saying about how do you then translate that commercially? Well, we're going into retailers, to buyers, and saying we have a much younger audience than your typical gin set. We can drive incremental revenue and bring a new customer to your stores.
I don't think any of you would shy away from the fact that, having a famous name attached to a brand does open a lot of doors in a way. But I know from speaking to all of you previously that there are also additional challenges that come with that, and additional things you have to kind of prove to people that you are credible as a brand and that your liquid has credibility. Can you talk us through some of the ways that you have expanded as a brand and how you've managed to grow? Because I think anybody who is looking to grow their business could take some value from that.
There we go. Okay. So I just want to come back to what Vishal was saying in terms of how they're marketing their brand, and it's more of a, what did you say, a marketing brand? Communications, and ultimately what we're doing is the same thing. We're trying to connect with the consumer. Whether or not they're drinking it right away, they will eventually, but you're trying to connect with that consumer. So we've evolved obviously over the last 6 years, and we're still, every day learning from our mistakes and what we can do better. It's really connecting with the consumer and how they're perceiving you. And so I think what people don't realize is that celebrity brands are it's almost harder to sell it out the gate. So out the gate, everybody wins. And the next day, you got to start from scratch again, because most people today are going to say, oh, it's a celebrity brand, I don't want anything to do about it. You go in Brooklyn and you got bars that say no celebrity brands poured here. Those are the ones I tell my sales team to go and sell to, because those are the ones that want to believe, and you have to prove to them. So as you evolve as a brand, credibility, obviously awards are a great thing. They are important. What's the quality? And if people can stand behind the quality of their product, you will eventually get believers, and liquid to lips. So the more you're in market, the more you're doing that. So your way of marketing to people and getting people to recognize the brand, eventually they're going to come and try it. So when you have an event, they try the liquid, then they're believers in the brand, but there's a story. So it's connecting with the consumer with a great story, but more importantly, liquid. The liquid doesn't stand up, the consumer will eventually walk.
And you mentioned awards. How important or powerful has that been for you in terms of growth?
I think, I'll speak on behalf of Ian and Paul. For them, it was very important because, again, they've got this initial negative view. Oh, it's a celebrity. What do they know? So when they're creating something, they're doing it and they're getting better. And, I joke with Ian, I say you're a better blender than you were actor. And I'm grateful for that. But it's really, for them, it's just like, it is a reward. It's like, hey, I'm doing it right. And people are tasting this and saying that this is good. So yeah, for us as a company, they're great. I'm not saying it's going to get you more doors open, but it gives you a little bit more credibility. And that's important, especially when you're doing, big competitions where they're big blind competition. You're up against the best of the best and you can stand up on the same. It's a great feeling. So I do think they're important.
Duncan, what has expansion looked like for Wolfie's, and how have you, convinced distributors, retailers on trade to stock Wolfie's, to, that there's a lot of potential in the brand?
I think when we first launched, we were approached by over 25 markets to stock it. Probably the first couple of weeks, I wanted to say yes to everything, and very quickly realized that we had to build depth, not breadth. Fundamentally, probably answering your other question, when we look at our brand, going back to it, I see it as two different universes. You've always got Rod's universe. He can talk to his audience at shows, on his social media, by his database, absolutely. Can he cross over into ours? Absolutely as well. Do we use him front-facing for the brand? Very rarely. Does that mean he's not involved? No, because as I said, he's just finished a 20-date tour. We had over 80 customers going to his shows backstage. He alone put out probably half a dozen of his own content, but he doesn't live in Wolfie's channels. Wolfie's channels is built for all the community work we're doing with regards to, as I said, over a dozen rock bands in London who are actually now opening accounts for us. We've got a couple of bars, Stereo Cupid's one of them. They demand at every venue they go to that Wolfie's is stocked behind the bar. which is fabulous. You can't buy that. But fundamentally, these guys give you organic content as well. They give you their reach. And then someone like a Deftones or Youngbloods, that's a different scale altogether. Growth-wise, we focused on 2 or 3 key markets. So in London, for example, our ambition was how do we get into the most credible, say 40, 50 on-trade accounts, working with the best bartenders who are going to then shout about the brand. Our brands are pretty different. We realised if we wanted to go toe-to-toe with other Scottish whisky companies, we're going to get our asses kicked. So we've fundamentally built a Schumann jukebox 2 weeks ago and stuck Rod Stewart in it. And we've got other bands going in it in central London. And we've got water coolers, which you'll probably see, which we use as cocktail devices in pubs. But there's a bar, Slim Jim's, that last night, for example, sold 8 bottles from it. So our whole focus is about getting the right accounts, but more importantly, driving rate of sale. Because going back to a distributor or retailer, they'll get awareness of a celebrity being involved, but they won't give a shit if it's not going to sell, if it's not going to drive volume. So our focus last year to 2 years has been credibly saying, all right, this is our game plan for any market, on trade and off trade, and this is how we're going to shift bottles, as well as building a cool brand, because otherwise it's a shooting star. It's just a waste of time.
And you mentioned, was it 25 markets initially when you launched, kind of wanted the product. So how do you kind of whittle that down and make the decision that these are the markets that we should focus on to begin with?
First of all, if it's a distributor, we sort of asked what the plan was and what our proof of concept showed in other markets. And a lot of the times they came back saying, no, we sell to Rod Stewart fans for £80,000 a bottle. We said, well, thanks very much for your time. That'd be great. Probably the hardest part. So in Holland, we're also national with Holland Hall there, which is fantastic. It's basically sometimes you can go too far too quickly. You can get too distribution can be too big before we can actually get the awareness out there. Thankfully, we've managed to keep up with it so far. Even silly things, we've got our own TVs we're sticking in stores, and we've seen a rated sale increase of 8 times by putting visibility into these stores. But going back to the depth, not breadth, it's also cash flow. If we had 50 million quid, I'd love to go into 20 markets, but we also don't. So we've got to use our cash available to build proof of concept and then try and replicate as we go. So.
And Vishal, for you and for James Gin, with James May, can you tell us a little bit more about how he is working with the brand to create expansion opportunities and those extra connections and listings?
Yeah, so we actually like to make the distinction between sort of like celebrity founded and celebrity endorsed brands. I think Vincent made the point earlier, and we've very much fallen the camp of, it's a celebrity founded brand. We try and connect James's sort of personal story with James Gin and communicate that to buyers. So James owns a pub where he lives in the UK. He owns 50% of it. The pub was going out of business during COVID. He sort of stepped up and bought a pub because he was like, otherwise living in the English countryside would be completely pointless. And we use that story of James as a pub owner himself, understanding the difficulties and the travails of hospitality. So this is a genuine sort of authentic story. He had a pub with no one in it. He thought he'd create some gin to sell in it. That's how the sort of origins of that of the brand started. That's the story that I think really resonates with in the UK, in particular with the on trade. There are lots of pub groups to go after, and I think they kind of the ones that we've started having some success with sort of see sort of James himself in them, in that he owns a pub, and some of our incentives that we run are like put your feet up, come to James's pub, have lunch, stay the night, etc. And I think that communication piece has really worked. I think James himself, he wants to be involved in the brand in a lot of different ways. Obviously, we have our sort of YouTube channel. That's our main platform. He creates a lot of content. And we say to, bars, buyers, retailers, etc., if you list us, we can help promote your product on our platform. That's 12 million organic eyes on it every month. You don't have to do anything other than just list our product. We'll then drive all those people into your store. We can supplement that with James coming in, our store signings attract a huge loyal audience. I think 6 hours. A guy once drove with his mum all the way just to see James May. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal what some people will do. But we use that. So we use it carefully. Like, we don't want it to be devalued. We don't want it to be sort of like, that scarcity factor. I think it's really important. And I think, our biggest challenge is going to be over the next sort of 5 years as we grow. How do we create a brand that's more centered around James as a personality rather than James the celebrity? He's a character in our story. He's not, he's not the be all and the end all. And that's one of the challenges that we're gonna face. And we're starting to develop things that we could do in order to sort of overcome that. But that's sort of our sort of big thing in the future.
Following on from that, Vincent, I'm going to come to you because Brothers Bond launched last year in travel retail, and you've just recently launched this year in the UK as well. How did you ensure that the brand was ready to expand into those markets, and why those markets in particular?
Well, so we specifically chose the UK. Obviously, we launched in the US about 5 years ago, and we wanted to make sure we had a core foundation there. And, we made mistakes, like Duncan said, you can go too big, too quick, understanding that, we launched during a pandemic, so we clearly went off trade heavy, whereas not traditional way to build a brand in your big national retailers. So that was something we had to kind of scale back and understand, what can we do better? So when we looked at the UK, and the UK was one we really studied for a few years because, one, it is a very mature and evolved specific whiskey market. And the way we speak to our consumers in the US is very different than the way we're going to speak to our consumers in the UK. And so it's learning how they consume, when they consume, what they're consuming. So it was really a studied approach, which, we're very new in. So we'll see if we're going to be successful. So far, it's been great. We've got great partners, and it's also leaning in. And like Vishal said, what we bring to the table is not just great liquid, great story, great brand. We partner with everyone in the sense that we are there to support them, whether it's a retailer, a distributor, or the local pub. We can use our social media value, what we do, and we're very open to it. And if you see our social media, we are very open to sharing. Again, it's not just about us. It's about the industry. How can you help it build? So when we look at, declining markets or alcohol consumption, we've brought in also a very different demographic to the category, specifically American whiskey. But overall, I think we're seeing in the whiskey industry, we want to be touching the next generation. They're not going to drink the way I did. And if you can't find a way to communicate with them, and that's where we're lucky, I think, as celebrity, founded brands, is we have a way to connect with them a little bit more quickly than your traditional brands, but you have to speak to them the right way. So learning about the market before you enter it, 100% we need to do, we are doing. GTR has been something very interesting because clearly we went global very quickly. But the nice thing is, when you're in an airport or you're in a duty-free store, people from all over the world go through the Frankfurt airport or the, Vienna or London, whatever it is. You go in, you're touching consumers from all over the world, but those who already know you get to see you in a different way. And that's really special. The Frankfurt airport, I think, has 6.3 million Americans traveling through it every year. That's a lot of Americans who are going to see Brothers Bond, a brand that they know at home, in a foreign market. And there's a real way to connect there where you're like, hey, there's a borderless way to build a brand. And I think GTR is one of the spaces that I see as a very valuable component of our business. It's a way to reach more consumers telling the story. But you got to remember that this new generation, I have daughters that are snapping with their friends in Australia. They're snapping with people in Japan. They can communicate quickly. So if they can see product and feel it in different markets like that, it's amazing. So it's very tough. I'm not going to say it's not, you're dealing with every time zone in the world now. But you got to be ready. And I think brands, especially brands that have the attachment of celebrity, most celebrities are known beyond their border. So it's a great way to build and expand.
Interesting about what you were saying about younger generations, how they communicate differently, and the posting on stories. And Vishal, I'd be interested in your take on kind of looking more broadly at the spirits world, not necessarily just celebrity spirits, but do you think we as an industry are leveraging the power of social media as much as we possibly could be, given the kind of communications background and association of James Gin as well?
Put simply, I would say that most spirits brands aren't exploiting social media enough. As I said, we've got 1.6 million followers. We've got 350,000 on Instagram. Lots of spirits brands, have, followings on Instagram, but we've got a YouTube channel. We've got 850,000 followers on YouTube. I don't know many of any spirits brands who even have a YouTube channel. But for us, YouTube is great. It's an amazing secondary revenue stream for us. We generated £200,000 in ad revenue on our YouTube channel. So that's people bidding to advertise their product during one of our videos. So that £200,000 is great. We've got a cost neutral marketing model, so we can fuel the more sort of traditional on and off trade marketing initiatives. So for us, YouTube is amazing. And if anyone's got the time and you've got 5 minutes, go on our channel. It's pretty funny. The content has actually got nothing to do with gin. I mean, we have to beg James to mention the gin. He also says, don't like, don't comment, don't subscribe. The more he does that, because we're not actively selling, people want it more. And so we found a really interesting way on YouTube to promote the brand, but also to create a differentiated business model. We're also on TikTok. We've got 360,000 followers on TikTok. Again, I think people think, you're not allowed to advertise on TikTok. I mean, you are. You have to be careful what you say. But again, we don't hard sell the gin. It's more memes, viral trends. Again, James eating a sandwich, building Lego. It's got nothing to do with gin. But again, if you watch 3 or 4 of our videos, you click on the handle, you click on the link tree, and then you get to the gin website, you've already been sort of subsumed by the brand and you're willing to give it a go. I mean, we have a lot of people have said, I've never drunk gin before. It's what my dad drank. I've never tried it, but James wanted me to try it. And the hilarious thing is, James doesn't even talk about the gin on the channel. So again, it's that organic, real authentic storytelling that we feel everyone in spirits, there's a huge opportunity to leverage social media, just like every other consumer vertical. I think, in spirits, it's very focused on Instagram, for example, a lot of paid advertising. We're not a big fan of paid. I'm just not a big fan of paying for anything. So organic social media content, that's where we believe it is at.
Said like a true CEO there. Duncan, in terms of market expansion for Wolfie, it's like, which markets are you finding particularly exciting at the moment, and why?
I think we're focusing on markets that are quite heavily led in a rock and roll music scene. So London's quite an easy one for us, and I think what we've started to learn is how quickly people are receptive to it. I mean, whiskey and rock and roll have got a bit of a love affair going on. They have for a few years. Amsterdam. I mean, I'm heading to Holland tomorrow to spend the week there because we're starting to work with 2 or 3 big music promoters, record labels, a lot of bartenders. And kind of our kind of scene there for any new market, our game plan is basically how can we connect very, very quickly into the decision, the influencers, essentially, not the influencers that I don't really like, the ones that pay to play online, but who are the actual cultural people in a city that everyone goes, if it's a tattoo parlor or a bar or whatever it is, and that's going back to Vincent saying, it's the dirty work. It's me going to Holland every week for the next 6 months, or going down to London every week. But the payoff is it builds your brand in a credible way. You start to get, as I say, go back to, I hate to say it, because you probably want to talk more about Rod Stewart, but unfortunately it's more about rate of sale for us with the right people. Package that up, create offline activations for an online audience, again, completely organically, and you just look to grow from there. And I mean, in the last week, we've had 3 or 4 brands. If you told me would want to collab with us a year ago, I'd have told you you're off your head. I was going to swear there, but I didn't want to. So it's kind of, as I said, the symbiotic nature of it. You work with cool people. Funnily enough, other cool people want to work with you. And I sound really old for saying cool people as well. So.
And in terms of that, I'd like to hear from all 3 of you, actually, because Vincent, you mentioned a little earlier how you talk to your consumers and drinkers in the US is different to how you talk to them in the UK, for example. How much are you finding with your brands that you have to quite specifically target your messaging, your communication, market to market? Can you quite broadly approach it with like one tone, one, sort of one direction where you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, we're learning again, with the approach specifically to the UK, because that's the most recent, just in talking and working with your partners closely. So with our partners, Maverick Drinks in the UK, they know the consumer, they know what the industry wants in the UK. So it's listening to your partners and not coming in saying, we know this, and that kind of attitude of our brand is this is how you will sell it, this is how you'll do it. It doesn't work that way in international markets. What works in one doesn't necessarily work in the other. That's aside from the product. Yes, we're not altering the product, right? The product is the same, but the way you deliver it is going to be a little bit different. So, we're learning with the UK, seeing it, but it's really listening to your partners, because as much research as we can do, it's hearing what they're going to tell us, what works, what doesn't. And again, every market's different. We're in Japan as well. And Japan was one where it's obviously there's a language difference, starting from there. How do you approach it? They don't want to be sold to, they want to hear the story. It's figuring that out. And it's a learning process. And I think that's something too, where whether you're a celebrity brand or not, you're a brand that has to learn the industry. And those challenges can be even bigger when you have a celebrity, because the assumption is that oh, you're big, and no, you don't. We're still learning. We're the same. So it's a tough one. Sorry, went out a little bit there.
No. I was going to say, I think people also assume you've got mega millions and bucks. I'm just like, no, we really don't. We look at every penny. That's a really important thing to say. Everyone just assumes that, the celebrities bankroll it, but couldn't be further from the truth. So two things I'll say to that. We have a global tone of voice, that we make sure that all our copy and any content that goes out there kind of embodies our sort of global brand strategy. I think for us, we execute our activations in market locally. So a good example is we have two sort of main products, Asian parsnip, where the sort of suggested serve is a gin and tonic, and then we also have American mustard. And with American mustard, the suggested serve is a piccoltini. Very deliberate. Asian parsnip, gin and tonic, we approach in every market outside of the US. That's the one that we lead with, because they understand gin. Gin and tonic is the easiest serve to have it in. It's a very easy sell into anyone. What we found is when we were leading with Asian parsnip and gin and tonics in the US, first question is, what's gin? Second question is, what's tonic? Have you had a Negroni? That's got gin in. Oh, didn't know that. So we were like, we've got to go about this, in a more traditional way. We've got to go product first, think of the serve, kind of going against everything we believe in typically, but then we've executed differently. So that's why we went with American mustard. It's a mustard gin. We're going after the piccoltini serve. It's our twist on a dirty martini with pickle juice instead of olive. And when we've gone in with the piccoltini, people are like, that's interesting. I like that in a cocktail. Like, that's how we start. So we've kind of approached it in a slightly different way. We kind of have our global tone of voice, and that comes through in all the messaging. But then product execution is different by market. And then I think the second thing is whether a market knows James or not is really important. And so, as I said, James is a character in our story. He's not a credential. We talk about James as a slightly mad, eccentric professor who spent an inordinate amount of time trying to make the world's best gin in a cold shed in England. We don't talk about, he's a Top Gear presenter, because if you don't know what Top Gear is, you've already got lost. So for us, it's about how do we build that personality of James and not just rely on his fame.
Interesting. Duncan, do you find that you have to tailor the tone of Wolfie's or the approach of Wolfie's depending on what market you're in?
We probably should, yeah. But the way I see it is going back to that Nike comparison of getting local talent to help promote and grow your business. Being a bit rock and roll and all that it's actually quite nice to be a bit of a car crash when you've got people in Amsterdam doing one thing with your brand. And don't get me wrong, we do censor it because some of the stuff we've had recently has been pretty wild and X-rated in dive bars throughout the world. But yeah, we've got the tone of voice. We want to be cheeky, we want to be irreverent, we don't want to be assholes. We don't want to say you to Scottish whiskey. We're part of the club, but fundamentally, rock and roll is you give music or you give a product or whiskey to someone and enjoy it. Rock and roll, see what happens. So, but the beauty is we get a bucket of organic content. I said some of it absolutely filthy and some of it really good.
In keeping with the brand tone of voice.
Yes, yeah. Our very classy January campaign. Fuck dry January. So.
If there was one celebrity spirit myth that you could debunk or, kind of have never asked to you again, what would that be?
I'll go left to right, right to left.
One that I would debunk, I mean, you have to remember that in building a brand, it takes work. It doesn't matter who's doing it. So the idea that this just came to fruition without effort and energy put into it can be really frustrating when you hear people just assume that this was just miraculously created. When you have founders that are celebrities, they are people that work too. And so that notion of, they're forget the involvement, they didn't really work for it, is bullshit. So being asked like how involved are they and what do they do, that, and I'm not your question specifically, but in general, that's something when there's the automatic that is, well, it's just a celebrity, it's not real. There are people behind the scenes that do this, and whether or not it's a celebrity or a CEO or anybody in any company, brands take time to build. So that kind of notion of them thinking, well, this just came due like this without work, it's frustrating to hear that.
Vishal, is there a misconception you would debunk?
Yeah, and I think I touched on it earlier, but yeah, I think the notion that the celebrities just, blanket checkbook bankrolling the whole thing. I mean, it couldn't be, it couldn't be further from the truth. I think from James' Jim perspective, James provides an inordinate amount of his time to the point that Vincent made, 500 hours of filming on our social content, 28 days in market last year. That's a hell of a lot of commitment. And then, he doesn't get involved in like the business side of things and expects us to run the business well and run it profitably because he's like, I'm providing all of this. What are you guys doing? Kind of looking around at us. So yeah, I think it's a misconception. I think when you then speak to distributors and buyers, they are looking at the name and they're thinking, what's the big listing fee that I can charge these people? I'm like, I'm really sorry, but we don't have that level of money. I was like, what we can give you for free is, we can promote you on our media, on our social media, and that's earned media spend for you. But it's a common misconception that we're all just sat here. We've got millions and millions in A&P budgets. It literally couldn't be further from the truth.
Duncan,
I'm going to be quick. I don't like the word celebrity brand. That's it. I just don't like it. I said my example of Wrexham Football Club is that a celebrity football team. But don't get me wrong, there's been loads of crap celebrity endorsements. But a celebrity brand is, I would have called it a very different name then. We would call it Wolfie's Whisky. So.
I have one final closing question for you guys, which is, do you think there's still room for more celebrity spirits brands to enter the space and find success?
I think there's always room for lots of good brands. And if a celebrity is a founder of it, rock and roll. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd echo what Duncan said earlier. I haven't got any time for any crap celebrity endorsements, but if there's celebrities who are willing to put the hard yards and effort in, then I think great products deserve to be out there, and they've got a platform and a voice to help promote them as well.
Yeah, I agree with both of them that there is absolutely room for it, and I think if anything, they can help the industry continue to find success. I think any new celebrity brand, and I agree with you, Duncan, I absolutely hate the word celebrity brand because it just has a negative connotation to it. Absolutely, there's room for it. They see walking around here today, all these new brands popping up. There's going to be room for it. I think that it's finding the right product and the right market they'll find success and there's room. But otherwise, if it's to slap your name on a bottle, move on.
I was laughing at my wife got your phone. Why did we so earlier?
Amazing. Thank you all so much for your insights and thoughts today. Please put your hands together for our speakers and thank you so much for joining us.
Well done, lads.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.